Hey guys, Craig Gibson here with Sons of Liberty. So before we get started, let me just put this up front. So this is an opinion based on history and on current events. Okay, so let's just put that out there right up front. All right, Civil War 2.0. The reason I said 2.0 is because I don't want it to be confused with the Civil War that began in 1861. Okay, all right, Civil War 2.0. Over the last 5 years, we've heard different people talk about different things. Whether there was going to be another civil war, what was going to trigger that civil war, when the civil war might happen. All right, so looking at everything that's gone on, I would say 2013 was really the start of Civil War 2.0. Now, some people, when they think Civil War, they're thinking they're going to see what you would read about the Civil War 1861 to 65. But this is a different kind of Civil War. Okay, for a long time we'd say the Civil War already started in 2013. The only thing is shots have not been fired yet. So Civil War 2.0 was kicked off based on fourth generation warfare. For those of you that are not familiar with fourth generation warfare, what that is in simple terms, it's any war in which one of the major participants is not a state, but rather non-state violent actors. So, we start looking at things like Black Lives Matter, Antifa. Black Lives Matter started in 2013. Antifa has actually been around, not necessarily here in the United States, but has been around since like 1932. And like a lot of things, Antifa's original idea, the original idea behind it, made sense. There was something good about it. Antifa, with the rise of Mussolini and really the person some would argue is the father of fascism. I don't know if I would go that far, but the arguments have been made for that. Okay, but they've been around a long time. Like a lot of good intention ideas, what we see today is a misguided idea of what fascism is. What they don't realize is what they're doing, in essence, is actually fascism. So, Civil War 2.0. All right, fourth generation warfare. What is it? Well, fourth generation warfare is typically complex and long term. Now, some could say that Iraq and Afghanistan would fall under fourth generation warfare. Complex, long term, they're not really state sponsored actors, more your groups, the Taliban, ISIS, Al Qaeda, and several others that are out there, terror groups. Terrorism, the tactics of terrorism are employed during fourth generation warfare. So what is terrorism? Terrorism is using violence to achieve a political or religious goal, such as changing the political landscape of a country, changing the religious landscape of a country, things you may not agree with, so you employ terroristic tactics to bring fear to the people so that they will become complacent and compliant with your definition of what the country should be. Fourth generation warfare it's a non-national or transnational base. It's highly decentralized. They don't have necessarily a base of operations. You've got different groups, Antifa in different cities, BLM in different cities, in different chapters. So they don't really have necessarily one main hub. It's just, different leaders of these different groups employ different tactics and have different goals. And that's what's really interesting is they're not even all fighting for the same goal necessarily. So there's a direct attack on the enemy's culture, including genocidal acts against civilians. And we have seen them trying to destroy the American culture for a very long time. And I said at the beginning that, in my opinion, Civil War 2.0 started in 2013. Now, there were many events that led up to this, all the way back into at least the 90s, possibly even further back. But it's been building. It's been building, and 2013, that was the spark that it took to initiate this. We see civilians being injured, killed, buildings burnt down, businesses destroyed. So, it definitely falls into that category. Highly sophisticated psychological warfare and propaganda used especially through media manipulation, which we've seen plenty of, internet trolls, bots, things like that. Again, things we've seen a lot of. All available pressures are used: political, economic, social, and eventually military. When you go out and you destroy a city, you are affecting the economic landscape, the political landscape, and the social landscape. When people are afraid to go shopping, when people are afraid to go out, when people are afraid to go to work, or when they can't because you've destroyed businesses, the place of business that they would go to, you start destroying the economy. Political, it's an election year, 2020. So you're using these to try to change the story. Change how the story ends in 2020 with the election. Because if you can continue to blame the current president for everything going on in our country, and sway enough people to actually believe your lies and your propaganda, or scare enough people into believing it, then your candidate wins the election, or someone who you view as your candidate, because you're willing to buy into the political promises that most politicians never keep. Low intensity conflict involving actors from all networks. Again, we can see where we haven't had necessarily all-out gunfights in the street, or complete takeovers of Capitol buildings, infiltration of Washington, D.C. Now, we have seen things like the Chaz in Seattle. We've seen complete neighborhoods just about totally destroyed because of the actions of these people. It lacks a hierarchy. While there's a founder or founders of these groups, each state, each city that has their own chapter, they have their own president, I guess you would call them, their own leader, whatever. And most of the time you can see where that so-called leader has zero control over the situation. They're not an effective leader, especially when you see videos of people actually protesting, not committing acts of violence. And then others within the group or that infiltrate the group decide, no, this ain't good enough. We're gonna start looting. We're gonna start rioting. We're gonna start destroying things. They have no control. It's typically small in size with a spread out network of communication and financial support. Now, there's been a lot of rumors as to where these groups are getting their financial support. And, if you listen to all the so-called fact checkers, oh no, George Soros ain't got nothing to do with it. And the Democratic Party has nothing to do with it. You know, coincidence doesn't exist. Everything happens for a reason. Everything happens on purpose. There is no such thing as coincidence, okay? So it seems interesting that certain things are happening on the Democratic side, certain things that they're trying to stop the president from doing. They're trying to infiltrate these elections without actually being able to be called out. So, I'm sorry, but I have a hard time believing that none of them have anything to do with this. We've got plenty of people in this House and the Senate that have been there way too long and have become millionaires while being in office. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just have a really hard time believing that. Use of insurgency tactics and subversion, terrorism, and guerrilla tactics. Again, we've seen this. They will use whatever tactics necessary to make the changes that they think need to be made. Now, I want you to think back to 2016, all right? 5 Dallas police officers were killed, 9 more injured, 2 civilians injured. The gunman specifically stated he wanted to kill white people, especially white cops. Now, this was all, again, this is after the start of BLM because of black criminals being shot by police officers. And, we're not going to get into whether they were justified or not. But the point is, this guy, that was his intent, to kill white people and especially white police officers. Now, like all terrorists, he's a coward. He was a coward. Because after he fired those shots, they killed those 5 police officers and injured 11 other people. He ran and barricaded himself. Now, after a standoff, police ended up sending in a bomb disposal robot and ended up taking him out using explosives. And, argument could be made on a constitutional level, on a legal level, of whether that was the right thing to do or not. But whether you feel it was right or wrong, it was the first time in U.S. history that we know of that a robot was used to take out an assailant. You start to get into some gray area there. Some serious gray area. Now again, I'm not saying whether they were right or wrong. I can tell you, as far as I'm concerned, they saved the taxpayers lots of money by taking the guy out and putting an end to the start of his killing spree. So why do I say this? We are already in the Civil War. Okay, 1960s Lebanon. In the 1960s, Lebanon was doing really good. They had a booming economy. The intrabank was funneling funds through there for all the oil-rich nations surrounding. So it was a tourism place, a great place to go visit. People could go there and shop and just have a good time and vacation and that. But in 1966, the intrabank collapsed. And when it did, it brought a disruption to law and order in Lebanon. Plus, there was the surge of Palestinian refugees, and, with the help of Yasser Arafat, they decided to use Lebanon as a base because, look, Lebanon's economy was dead at that point. There was no law and order. Yasser Arafat and his followers were able to do whatever they wanted. And Lebanon didn't have, a powerful military, so they couldn't really fight it. So they used this as a launching pad to launch strikes against Israel. Well, this, of course, led to the 1967 Arab-Israeli War and other conflicts since then. But the officials of the country are doing much like our elected officials here in the U.S. are doing. You know, here's this group, they're wanting to just destroy everything, cause chaos, and they let them do it because it was easier than upholding law and order. Somalia had a similar situation. Somalia was established in 1960. Mohammed Said Bayer, I believe is how it's pronounced, was a dictator, and eventually he was overthrown in 1991. Well, much like we saw in Libya, when under the Obama administration, we got involved in that mess, and Gaddafi was taken out, which led to conflict. You had all these different groups trying to gain some land and gain some territory and become the leaders of these areas, which, as always, ends up in conflict. Well, this was what happened in Somalia. You know, then you had the warlords and people starving to death because they were taking the food, they were taking the weapons, they were taking everything to care for their own groups, their own terror networks, and leaving the common people to starve and to die off, or they would take them for slavery purposes, really. Women, and we know what they were used for. Men were used to fight whether they wanted to or not. So, and this is, if you look at the history and what has happened in those places, and there are some that will say, "Oh, that can't happen here. We've got a great military." Yes, we do. But let's face it, the 1807 Insurrection Act, which there are many that have said President Trump needs to initiate that to put an end to all this going on. But the other side of that is, what will that trigger? Because how many people are going to stand for the president saying, all right, we're putting the military on the ground, we're going to put an end to this right now? I mean, we've seen all kinds of pushback and commentary and opinions on his use of federal agents so far. What do you think is going to happen if he puts 101st Airborne on the ground? It's not going to go well. So, the president is in a situation where if he does one thing, it could be bad for the country. If he does something else, it could be bad for the country. If he does nothing, it could be bad for the country. He's in a no-win situation. And of course, he's constantly blamed for what we see going on right now, even though it started back in 2013 and even further back in some cases. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about with the with Civil War. All we can do is pray that the evil comes to an end before it gets any worse, before we are in an all-out war. A lot of people are still blind. They still don't think it can happen here. You know what? We're humans, just like people in Somalia and Lebanon and Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and all these other places, Egypt. I mean, we're all human beings. It can happen. It is happening. And we've let it happen because we have lost our way. We have gone from a nation that supported life, supported our troops, supported our police, supported our president, supported our flag and our national anthem, to a nation that we just want to get rid of it all. it's inconvenient. You know, we're now a nation where feelings mean more than facts. We're a nation where feelings mean more than the truth. You know, we've got a lot of churches out there. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of churches that are so busy worrying about their numbers, the people in the seats, the money coming in, that they're afraid to speak the truth. So when I see churches where they aren't afraid to speak the truth, and they're out there and they're doing everything they can to be a light in this world, that's the kind of church I like to be a part of. Because at least I know they're not afraid. They're not putting fear before their faith. They're not putting this world before God. And we have done a great job in this country of trying to push God out, or trying to conform him to fit our own ideas, our own theories, rather than just letting the truth prevail. And that's what we need to be focusing on. We need to be in prayer. We need to be raising our voices, making our voices heard, drowning out those who want to destroy our nation. That's what we need to be doing. But, all right, guys. So, as always, faith, not fear. Be the kind of American worth the sacrifices being made. Okay? All right, guys. We will talk to you later. Y'all have a great week.